The media industry is changing rapidly as new digital players and programs are taking the field. Veteran journalist Tara Palmeri, who's worked for ABC News, Politico, The Washington Examiner, and The Post Page Six, is one of a new breed of writers whose work and inside intel for Puck is impacting everyone and everything around her. Tara and her team are among the new influencers. From Ballard Studios in Washington, D.C., it's 13th and Park.
You and I can differ, but that doesn't mean you and I cannot be friends.
That often is missing in politics.
We went from North Korea to M&M. That's a lot, man.
Aliens could have invaded and nothing would surprise me at this point.
It's a nightmare.
Those are the facts.
We have to solve everything.
What's in this tea?
Well, Tara, great to have you here. A journalist coming in who covers so many things. I mean, think about what you're covering right now. As we speak, you have, of course, the inauguration, the post-inauguration, all the executive orders. The Supreme Court has been very active. You know, the wildfires, obviously, in Hollywood. What things are you kind of focused on, like right now, that you think are interesting and still have a lot of shelf life to go?
Well, obviously, the Trump show is everything, right? The WWE style, like executive order signing in which just chucks pens into the crowd. I mean, he's producing his presidency. Yeah. He is showing America what governance looks like. Now, how many of those executive orders actually hold up? Like, for example, can you really end birthright citizenship? It's a part of the Constitution. I'm paying close attention to everything immigration because we'll see what the deportations look like and how that's going to play in the media and how that might shift public perception. And, you know, Trump's in a honeymoon period right now. He's at the height of his powers. He just won the popular vote, big deal for, you know, Republicans. And it's like, what is he going to do with this power? I mean, will he, I don't know, say tomorrow I'm going to change the Constitution so I can run for a third term? You know what I mean? You got a guy right now who everyone's terrified of, not just Republicans to stay in line, but Democrats as well. Like, you're not really hearing a peep out of Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries.
Right.
I just don't think there are any real stars in the Democratic Party right now, except AOC. She's coming at Trump as hard as he comes at the Democrats. And there's no one else on the Democratic side who's doing that. So I'm kind of looking for stars right now. Like, if I was like a talent scout, I'm looking for like, who's got the ability to play hardball with Trump? And I'm not hearing it from Democratic leadership. Their DNC elections next week just seem lame. I'm like, who are these people? Like Ken Martin, Ben Wilkler. Like, these are not going to be the faces of the Democratic Party.
So is it fair to say, though, Tara, that what's going on right now, I don't think we've ever seen. I've never seen what the Trump administration is setting out to do. I would only compare it to things you and I have read about, which is FDR.
Right.
You're talking about a massive attempt at a massive transformational change in the way we do business here, right? No one knows ultimately how that's going to play out, so we haven't done that in about a century. But maybe that's one of the reasons why Democrats and others are having trouble at this moment pushing effectively back, with the idea also that the American people very clearly in this last election, every poll reflected the fact that they wanted change.
Yep.
They didn't like what was going on. So maybe that can explain why there isn't, you might say, an effective counterpunch yet.
You could argue that there's a reason why the Lake and Riley Act passed with bipartisan support.
Yeah.
I mean, Democrats are realizing like immigration is an issue that is favored by Democrats as well. More than 50% of the country, they want to deport illegal immigrants. Like, if you talk about illegal immigrants who are in jail or detained or have committed some sort of crimes, people want them out immediately. When you go into like, do you want families to be broken up because of DACA or, you know, that's a different story.
Correct.
ICE agents do not know how to produce a raid. You know what I mean? And if it looks like kids are crying, families are being broken up, I think that could change public sentiment. I think in the beginning of any administration, there's a honeymoon. And Trump is in the honeymoon and he's using it appropriately. Like, he's moving with fire and fury.
And speed.
And speed, because he knows that, you know, you only have a few years before the midterms. I would argue really only until like the fall, maybe. Yeah. And he's got to act quickly to get these things done. And I think Democrats are strategizing. And they know that Trump is popular right now. But do I think January 6th pardons, blanket pardons for people who attacked cops, is that really popular? Not really. But is it enough to make people, you know, rise up and march? I don't think so. Like, it might not be quite a boil yet for Democrats to really find something. I think they want to wait and see what Trump does. And if he does anything they can grab onto and turn into a big issue, they will. But until then, they seem kind of limp to me. Like, I just don't think that they figured out an effective counterpunch.
Well, there's also been the beginning, some will call it a realignment, that we saw in the inauguration ceremony. I mean, it blew my mind to look at the tech titans together, right?
Oh, wow.
Musk and Bezos, Zuckerberg.
The Illuminati right there in front of us.
The Illuminati, exactly. Right. I'm thinking, oh my God, what were the chances those four would have shown up publicly at we'll call the inauguration
they
this year
were
of Trump
villains
event,
on
right?
both sides.
Yeah.
The Democrats wanted to kill them after, at least Zuckerberg, after the 2016 election.
Right.
There was no way they were going to sit in front of cabinet secretaries right behind the family of the president as vice president. It's like you don't need to trade power in secret anymore. It can be out in the open.
How much of a factor do you think Elon Musk has been in popularizing all over again the Trump brand? Going back to the campaign, I would argue he was like a kid in the candy store, right? At some of these rallies, you saw it. I mean,
oh yeah.
Do you think that maybe helped in terms of Donald Trump's branding, that he got a bit of a permission slip from people like Elon Musk that, again, back in 2016, 17, you never would have imagined that would even have been a consideration?
So you think that Elon Musk transferred his type of cool, like his Gen Z brand. He brought the bros along. I guess, being associated with like a Tesla, it's a cool car, being
Right.
associated with space. There are some good brand associations you could say with Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Although he was seen as a bit like radioactive and nutty. But he was also a Democrat for a long time.
Right.
And it's sort of interesting. Like, he is the Bannon of this cycle because, Bannon brought the white working class along, which were, Democrats. And then Elon brought along the Gen Z, which usually kids are Democrats.
Right.
And the bros. And he offered them a type of masculinity that they could grab onto and feel like they could own. Like, my brother loves Joe Rogan. He loves Ben Shapiro. He loves all of these podcast bros.
All the fun ones.
He's 27. So
Right.
he's a Gen Z or really young millennial. I haven't figured that one out. But point is, he likes that type of masculinity. Do I think he admires Donald Trump? No. But I think he admires a guy like Elon Musk, and he admires a guy like Joe Rogan, and he admires these kind of guys who just say whatever they want, and they're rich, and they've got tons of women around them, and they are successful, but they're a little awkward at the same time.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you could see them being each way. They offer power. But that's what these figureheads offer. They offer power to people that feel like they don't have power.
So TikTok, the Supreme Court, in a rare unanimous decision, you don't see that a lot, 9-0 against TikTok, uphold the ban. And then Donald Trump comes right behind that and says, we're going to find a way to work this out. And of course, you go on TikTok, and TikTok itself puts a message up essentially thanking President Trump for saving the 170 million users.
Oh, yeah, it was
right?
pre-planned.
I mean, that kind of thing, which kind of breaks through all sorts of rules. Back in other generations, Supreme Court says you can't do X, you wouldn't do X, right? Donald Trump says, okay, I hear that, but I think we can make this work still. I'm the great deal maker. So give me a little time, give me a little rope here, and I think I can bring this all in for a landing where we secure our interests against, the People's Republic of China spying on you and me when we're on TikTok, and also allow people the joy, obviously, of a platform that they've really grown to love.
Yeah, I think he really took the nuclear option, in my opinion, by telling his Department of Justice to not enforce the ban. It wasn't like he was saying, let's do the stay, a 90-day stay, like what was the option in the law that he could have taken to try to find a viable sale. He was just like, let's just not enforce it at all.
You got to figure he's got a clock ticking on this, though, right? It's
not the same thing as doing the 90-day stay.
Yeah, that's true.
He's got a lot more time than 90 days. I did some reporting on this, that like the ideal situation for the TikTok buyers club, as you might call them, the Americans, like the Mr. Wonderful and Frank McCourt, who knows if they'll actually get that.
Right.
But the TikTok crew, which is a very powerful lobby, they are some of Trump's like closest allies, like Kellyanne Conway has been involved, David Urban. They have really pushed for Project Texas to come back, which was the deal that they had back in 2020. And it was a corporate sponsorship in which Oracle, which would own a lot of the data and processing, it would be on shore in Texas. It would own 20% of the company along with Walmart in a merchandising deal. And then China would get the rest of it, 80%. But the crucial part is the algorithm. And I don't think the algorithm's for sale. So
But this is like the fine line, right? So you have the now confirmed Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who very much is carrying the president's message about getting tough on adversaries. China, number one. right?
Right.
On the other hand, you've got TikTok that isn't completely out of business yet, right?
Right.
So you're kind of threading the needle a little bit on this, aren't you?
Oh, it's completely contradictory to Trump's entire, how do you make a TikTok deal part of a trade deal?
If it's owned domestically, you shut out the People's Republic of China, you take care of the security concerns, you keep the platform alive. That is
without the algorithm?
Right, but that's part of the sticky wicket they're going to have to try to figure out.
Mr. Trump signing an executive order last week, pausing a ban on the app from taking effect for 75 days, while his administration explores a potential sale or investment, later saying it could happen within 30 days.
Let's go from politics here to, Puck, which disclosure, I love Puck.
Oh,
I mean, it
is
is fascinating. It shows incredible reach in terms of intel. And this town in particular, Washington, feeds on intelligence. I think you do a tremendous job. And of course, it's not just Washington. You're talking about Hollywood. You're talking about the business world. What is it that allows Puck to traverse from looking at a story on the NFL's global expansion plans on the one hand, and then you turn around and you're doing an assessment on all the musical chairs of the Washington Post and CNN.
Right. Well, I think that the Puck model is based on talent that is obsessive about their industry. So they're almost like influencers, our reporters, our journalists, because they have such a knowledge base and they have such a deep network. And so we speak with authority and we write with authority about what we know. We have a little bit more liberty than maybe your typical columnist or reporter, in the sense that I could say something like, I could imagine this happening, or I could see this. You can really lean into your sourcing, your own analysis. It's almost like intelligence that you're offering. What if your clients came to you and they said, who do you think Elon Musk is going to partner with next? Do you know what I mean? What's his next thing going to be? I mean, you can call your sources and try to find out, but that guy doesn't even really know what he's going to do next. You can only really plan it based on moves he's made, people who are courting him, where his money is going.
But let's talk about you for a second. You've written for the Washington Examiner, ABC, I believe, Politico, Page Six.
Yep.
Now, for those who don't know, Page Six is, I think, the most compelling reading of the day for a lot of people. How did all those things kind of prepare you for where you are right now as a journalist, having written in all sorts of ways for different publications with kind of different standards, different missions?
Oh, I know. It's so weird, right? And then I was living abroad in Europe.
Brussels, right?
Europe, exactly. I've got TV experience. I was a White House correspondent. That's more legacy media, wrote playbook, newsletters. It actually all sort of, in a weird way, aligned me for exactly where I am right now, because I was a production assistant at CNN. That was my first job. But really, my first job was at the Washington Examiner, writing kind of a gossip column, right? And so from there, I went on to Page Six to work for Richard Johnson in the heyday of Page Six. And to be honest, I didn't really like covering celebrities. I always had the political bug. That's why I went to American University. And so I wrote political pieces at Page Six, and I had to cover celebrities too. But there was a part of me that was like, I just am more interested in people with power and what they do with it. I don't really care about celebrities and who they make out with and how their lives are going. So it got a little boring for me. I was still pretty young, though. I was 23 or 24 by the time I'd left Page Six. And I stayed at the New York Post and tried to earn my way up to getting into the City Hall, because that's sort of the prime beat to cover the city of New York at the New York Post. And so I spent some time doing a lot of stakeouts and knocking on doors, traveling all over the country. One time there was this US Open ref who killed her husband with a coffee mug. And so the arraignment...
I'm putting my coffee mug down right now, by the way.
Yeah, and this was in the middle of the Open. It was literally happening.
Wow.
And so she was going to be sent to California to be arraigned. My bosses, they wanted me to interview her, and they thought, if we get her on the plane as she's being sent to California, Tara has 6 hours to bother this woman and try to get an interview with her. I mean, they had the wildest ideas about everything. It was just my editors would be like, go run through traffic, go get us a story. We don't really care. So it was a wild time, but it was really good, scrappy, bootstrap, type of journalism. Really learned how to get the scoop. You were useless. They were don't even show up if you don't have a story, basically. So that was good training ground. I finally got to City Hall I wanted to. Spent some time there covering Bill de Blasio, which was very easy because he was a mess, as we know. Yeah. And then Politico decided to expand to Europe. And so I moved to Brussels with my Polish passport. I'd never been there before, packed 3 bags, and lived there for 2 years and covered the greatest stories, I think, at the time, which were Brexit, the Greek financial crisis, and sadly, the terrorism that was going on at the time. And so from that, I actually was near the airport when one of the bombs went off. I was tweeting that I was in communication with the Belgian government about what was coming out. And then CNBC asked me to go live, and I ended up just being on their shows like all day long. So I kind of stayed in that lane. Then, I think when you think about Puck and what I do there, having a podcast, kind of writing a column in my own voice, goes back to the Page 6 Washington Examiner days. So it's been fun. I know that was a long way of saying, how did I get here? But life has a weird way of getting us anywhere, right?
Always. Always. So let me take you back to Europe. So you saw when Trump went over to Paris after the election, you saw Macron and Trump getting along very, very well. I think they had an okay, not good relationship when Trump was president, but it was almost like both leaders were going overboard to show they were ready to row in the same direction. I don't think a lot of the world understood that, were ready to accept that Donald Trump could come in after all the talk about NATO, et cetera, and be well received.
Okay. Macron is hanging on for dear life right now.
Okay, good point.
I believe there's been like multiple attempts to try to oust him. So he needs Trump. Trump loves the pomp and circumstance. He was treated like a king.
Loved it.
It was better than
who wouldn't like that?
Of course. I mean, listen, they all know how to play to him, and it's flattery. Yeah. And they're all like putting out very bland statements about working together. And the Estonian prime minister said in Davos, we need to all get up to 5% of contribution for national security. They should be freaked out. Look at Russia just invading Ukraine. Estonia's right there, former USSR. Although I think the fact that like Russia couldn't even really take Ukraine truly is not a great sign for them either. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, Trump did promise to end the war in Ukraine on day one. I don't know, you're not supposed to hold him literally, but
I would like to think that Donald Trump is always directional. Here's what I intend to do. And then he'll really push that point. Yeah. You got to know that Vladimir Putin is thinking, okay, now I might have another option here. If he can't win the war, he certainly has a stake in bringing it in for a landing in a way where he saves face and everyone gets something out of it. Trump, in a very unique way, is in a position maybe to make that happen. Maybe not on day one, maybe not on day 7, but I think that is now plausible. Whereas before this election, I think you look at Ukraine, you think, oh, this could go on forever.
I think if anything, Trump could probably come in here now and get not just some concessions for Ukraine, but for the U.S.
So, Tara, last question is, given you come out of legacy media, you're now into new media, right? What advice do you have for men and women who are journalism students or want to become journalists in moving forward in this brand new kind of frontier we now find ourselves in?
If there is a way to thrive in this environment, I think it's through content creation. If you gravitate maybe towards the new media, if you learn how to really use all of the tools that you have in your toolbox, and you can keep moving and being willing to adapt. That's exactly. Right. And so right now we are in the social media phase of news. That's why I'm at Puck, and that's why I have a podcast, and that's why I do more digital work. It's like, I'm just trying to move into the future.
Well, I think you are the future. The future came at us really quickly. Tara, I really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you.
I really love the tremendous writing that goes into Puck.
Thank you.
From you and virtually everybody else. There feels to be less of an agenda and more of a drive for information sharing, which I think is key to the revolution we now find ourselves in with media. And boy, do we have interesting times ahead.
Thank you. This was so nice. Thanks for having me. It was a privilege.